My mother thought she could pull my strings forever. But every puppet eventually learns where the scissors are. And now, it's her turn to dance. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy my mother. It was slower than that, like noticing a draft in a sealed room and tracing it to a hairline crack. First it was the emails that never reached me, the internships that passed on my application even though the HR manager swore we'd had a great call, the friends who drifted without explanation. Then it was the way my mother would tilt her head when I mentioned someone new, as if she could already see the end of the thread and didn't mind tugging. "I'm only protecting you," she'd say, and the words were a velvet glove with wire inside. When I found the manila folder in the back of her closet, wedged behind her winter boots, labeled with my name in her neat, patient script, I didn't open it right away. I carried it like contraband to my car and set it in the passenger seat, and I drove without music with my heart drumming a wooden rhythm in my throat. I parked 3 blocks away at the river pull-off where couples came to fight or make up under the sodium lamps. I told myself I didn't want to know. Then I opened it. It wasn't all at once, the realization. It came like rain, steady, relentless, soaking through the lie of a dry forecast. Printouts of my texts, the ones I foolishly thought were private. Notes about my teachers, their weaknesses, collected like stamps. A spreadsheet of my college choices with columns labeled influence, leverage, and risk. At the bottom, a tab for romantic contacts, with my first girlfriend's name highlighted in yellow and the word unsuitable beside it in a font so calm you could nap in it. The folder smelled like my mother's linen closet. I thought I would vomit. On the last page, a photo of me 5 years old, scissors in hand, cutting green paper into little strips under her watchful eyes. On the back, in pencil, "He's learning." There's a kind of silence that follows a discovery like that, a vacuum where even the ugly parts of your childhood feel suddenly curated. I went home. I returned the folder to the closet, aligning the edges, smoothing the dust like I hadn't noticed it. That night I ate her lemon chicken and said thank you and watched her mouth form concern about my posture, my hydration, my sleep. She kissed my forehead like priests dip fingers in holy water. I went to my room and lay on top of the covers in the clothes I'd worn all day, and I stared at the ceiling until it blurred and I felt, finally, nothing. My mother was a school counselor for 28 years. Parents trusted her with their frightened kids, their angry kids, their kids who scratched at their arms under sweaters, their kids who clung. She knew the right words to say in any room. When she walked down the grocery aisle, people reached for her like a rope. If I had something good, a scholarship, a job interview, she knew before I told her. If I had something bad, she knew that too. It was witchcraft or gossip or both, but she always knew. I started keeping a second phone. I got it from a kiosk run by a boy in a hoodie who didn't look me in the eye. I told no one. I didn't write the number down. I memorized it and repeated it like a prayer under my breath. On that phone I contacted people I hadn't spoken to in years, the friend who'd suddenly stopped answering, the professor who'd cooled, the boss who'd withdrawn an offer the day before I was supposed to start. "This is going to sound insane," I said over and over, "but did my mother ever reach out to you?" Most ignored me. Some laughed. One man called back at midnight. He'd been my would-be boss at a small arts nonprofit. "She was polite," he said, the words careful, as if he were stepping over glass. "Persuasive. She framed it as concern. You weren't ready for the stress," she said, "and you'd had episodes in the past. She suggested it might be dangerous to put you in a client-facing role. She said I should watch for your mood instability." He cleared his throat. She quoted privacy guidelines at me, ironically. She was impressive. "I've never had episodes," I said. "I didn't think so," he said. "But that seed, you know." He exhaled. "She asked if we had late nights. She asked if anyone would be alone with you." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat with the second phone in my palm until my hand fell asleep. My mother's religion wasn't church. It was reputation. She polished it like silver. When a neighbor's teenager was caught shoplifting makeup, my mother delivered a casserole and a speech about restorative choices. When the principal's affair crawled out from under the rock of his email, my mother walked into the staff room with a smile and said, "We don't crucify people here." She saved everyone. She saved me, she said, from my worst self. I began planning. It felt like returning to a language I'd once been fluent in but had forgotten out of politeness. Planning was oxygen. I mapped her routines, her Wednesday hair appointment, her Friday yoga, her Sundays with the crossword and the sharp pencil. I learned her passwords from muscle memory. She reused, of course, control loves a pattern. I found her private cloud, tucked like a pearl in a shell folder named with the school's mascot. The files were organized with manic tenderness. There were no rants. There was no drunken confession. Just documentation, like a museum of me. I didn't want to ruin her. Not immediately. I wanted, if I am honest, to make her feel the thing I had felt since childhood, the invisible hand, the correction in the air, the sense that a choice I made had already been assumed. I wanted her to flick her eyes to the corners of rooms and find, finally, nothing. I assembled an audience. Revenge without witnesses feels like a sneeze with your mouth closed, it does something to your head. So I chose a night. My mother was to be honored at a district banquet, a Lifetime Achievement Award for a career spent giving young people their futures. There would be a stage, a microphone, a slideshow with Sarah McLachlan wafting through speakers. The superintendent would cry. A local journalist would be present, soft pieces build donations. The governor's education liaison had RSVP'd yes. The night was designed to crown her, to crystallize her myth in a single frame and hang it in the town's foyer forever. I volunteered to design the video montage. Who better than the devoted son, the one she was always telling people she had guided into adulthood? I collected baby photos, report cards, thank you notes from moms with bubbled hearts over the eyes. I scanned them with saintly care. I put them on a timeline. I added her favorite hymn played on a piano so delicate it hurt. But the montage the audience would see was not the one she previewed at home on our couch while I held the remote. I built two. One for her, one for the room. They started the same. They did not end the same. While I edited, I also wrote letters. Not to strangers this time, but to the people who had touched the web. The would-be boss, the professor, the ex. I asked them for one sentence each. Just one sentence of what my mother had said or asked or offered when she reached them. Some refused, still afraid of what it meant to put words on paper about a woman like her. Some were eager. She told me your father had a temper, wrote my ex, and that if I loved you I would help you heal by stepping away. Another, she said grad school would crush you and you'd drink. She said she'd seen signs. She suggested a gap year. She offered me a donation to redirect your slot. Donation. The charity of a scalpel. The last piece was the recorder. Not an app. I didn't trust devices that could be overwritten. A physical recorder no bigger than a pack of gum, with a tiny red eye. I slid it into the foxgloves on the table near the sink where my mother took phone calls because the window light made her skin look forgiving. I waited. Days of grocery lists and staff memos and, how is Denise? Then, one Thursday, my mother called the principal about a boy who'd gotten into a fistfight. If we can help shape the narrative early, she said, the words petting the air, we won't have to correct it later. Another day, she phoned my aunt and convinced her not to invite me to a reunion because he's busy, and it would only stress him. Another day, she called my therapist. Of all the recordings, that one I listened to the most. He doesn't need to talk about his childhood, she told the therapist I had chosen because she wasn't from town and didn't know anyone. He had a good one. Talking about it only makes him spiral. Maybe redirect him to gratitude practices. The therapist cleared her throat and said she couldn't discuss my treatment. My mother apologized sweetly and thanked her anyway. "You know how it is when you love someone who needs structure," she said. "You do what you can. Revenge is craftsmanship." Ordinary rage would have me storming into her room with the folder and the recorder and the letters and throwing them on her bed, demanding explanations, demanding tears. I'm not above ordinary rage. But I didn't want tears, not that night. I wanted the stage. I wanted the microphone. I wanted the room to see the woman they blessed and to watch, quietly, collectively, the crown tilt. The banquet was a chandeliered hymn to self-congratulation. The superintendent wore a tux and hugged everyone as if it were a funeral. Teachers I barely remembered squeezed my elbow and told me my mother saved them. My mother herself was luminous, navy dress, pearls like small moons. She kept looking at me. She squeezed my hand twice, our old code for solidarity. She couldn't have known the code had become a tourniquet. When they called her up, the room rose. I watched the governor's liaison wipe at her eyes. Apparently she had a mother too. The first part of the montage played, my mother with a bowl haircut as a girl, my mother in a cap and gown, my mother holding me on the first day of kindergarten, my mother kneeling to tie a child's shoe in a school hallway. Piano keys poured sugar water into the room. Then the screen flickered. Then the second part began. No narration. The images were enough. Scans of the spreadsheet with its 3 columns, the tidy word unsuitable in calm font. A screenshot of the email my mother had sent the nonprofit director with my father CC'd and then unCC'd, the version I was never meant to see. The single sentences, each in black on white, each labeled, from, names reduced to first initials and roles, Professor, X, Manager. An audio waveform unfurled across the screen like a snake, and the speakers filled with my mother's soft voice, "If we can help shape the narrative early." Another clip, another. He doesn't need to talk about his childhood. Then a photo of the manila folder. Then the 5-year-old me, scissors in hand, smiling. You could feel the room change temperature. People did not gasp, they shrank. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the superintendent, whose mouth had fallen a millimeter. I looked at the principal, who stood very still. I looked at the local journalist, whose pen, bless her, kept moving. My mother's hand found the lectern. She didn't reach for the microphone. She didn't try to unplug anything. She watched. It is not easy to watch yourself like that, like a bruise you don't recognize. When the screen went black, the lights recognized the end and brightened on cue. The room did not clap. Someone coughed. The superintendent said my name, as if I had become suddenly necessary. I stood and went to the stage. This is the part in revenge stories where the Avenger delivers a monologue honed to a diamond point. I had a version of that. I had written it at 2 a.m. and read it out loud to a plant. But on the stage, looking at the rows of teachers with their polite pain, looking at my mother with her pearls and her hands, I didn't use it. I said, I was 5 when my mother taught me the word discipline. I thought it meant doing what you're told. Tonight I've learned it also means telling the truth even when you've been trained not to. I paused. I had the room the way an undertow has ankles. My mother, I said, has done good. But she also did this. I gestured to the screen, to the black space where her sentences now floated in the memory of everyone present. The problem isn't only what she did to me, I said. The problem is that a story can be shaped so early that a person doesn't realize it's been shaped at all. My mother stepped to the microphone. For a second I thought she might refuse. Then she touched it like a small animal. I'm sorry, she said, which was in itself a miracle people wait decades to hear in rooms without chandeliers. Her voice did not break. I thought I was doing what mothers do. I thought I was keeping my son from making the mistakes I made. She looked at me. I wanted to keep you away from danger. There's always a pivot, a moment when what you thought will happen meets what is actually happening and something must give way. I had expected denial. I had prepared for it, for the letters, the recordings, for a final clip that would knock breath from lungs. I had not prepared for a soft apology that landed like snow on hot pavement, silent, dissolving. I did not lower my eyes. I kept my gaze level because that, she had taught me, is how you keep the room. Danger? I said. What danger were my friends? What danger was a job? What danger was therapy? The danger, she said, was your father. It should not have surprised me. It did. She spoke quickly now, the way people do when they know the only way out is through. He looks kind on holidays, she said softly. People do. But when you were small, he had a rage that scared me. I never told you because I thought knowing would set it inside you like a hook. He would wait until you slept to pour his whiskey. He would talk about how the world needed to toughen you. He would call recruiters at midnight and ask what kind of men they wanted. He would tell your teachers you were too soft. He would try to make you a version of himself. I told him to stop. He didn't. So I did what I had to. I made detours. I closed certain doors. I made new ones. I made you a new path. It is difficult to describe the silence of a room when its pity changes direction. Faces soften. The moral certainty that had gathered like a storm cloud disperses. The journalist's pen slowed, not from lack of interest but from the realization that this would be a different article now. The superintendent folded his hands as if in prayer. I felt rage and a strange relief duking it out behind my ribs like brothers. He never hit you, she said quickly, seeing the question rise. He never hit me. He loved you at his volume. But he was going to hollow you out with it. I chose to be the bad guy so he wouldn't. I chose to be the weather that frustrated you so his climate would not break you. There are many ways to be a villain. Being the villain to save someone is one I had never allowed her. Of course, it could also be a story she'd prepared for precisely this moment. With my mother, there was always a B-side. I had the recorder. I had the folder. I had the letters. I had not, until now, had this. You didn't have to lie, I said. My voice lifted without my permission. You didn't have to steal my decisions. I didn't know how else to keep you, she said. And there it was, naked, unbeautiful, the truth I believed even as I wanted not to. She had not trusted me to survive my autonomy. She had not trusted the world to meet me with anything but teeth. She had not trusted herself to let go. So she built a labyrinth and called it a garden. She pruned me until I resembled a topiary of the sun she could bear to watch. We went home separately. The banquet stumbled on without us, murmurs like moths behind us. I drove the long way. The river was a flat sheet of pewter. I tried to picture my life without the invisible hand and couldn't. I tried to picture my life with it and couldn't either. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's car was there. He'd poured 2 whiskeys and set them on the counter like an olive branch or a dare. Hell of a show, he said when I walked in. Your mother always did love a stage. Did you call my bosses? I asked. Did you talk to my teachers? He watched me over the rim. She liked to keep lists, he said. I like to let things happen. He shrugged. Maybe I made a suggestion or two about resilience. This family's too sensitive. That's all. It is easy, when presented with 2 ugly halves, to pretend you're a fair judge of the whole. My mother who micromanaged the narrative, my father who trusted the world to teach through bruises, me, a middle thing shaving myself into a shape that would survive them both. I packed a bag. I didn't slam the drawers. I put the manila folder inside and the recorder and the second phone. I left the house with both of them watching me from different doorways like gargoyles. Where are you going? My mother asked, and even now her voice assumed a right to know. To write my own life, I said, which was perhaps the most staged sentence I have ever said. To make my own mistakes. You'll be back, my father said, as if comfort were a cul-de-sac. Maybe, I said. I meant, not in the same shape. Revenge changed that night. It didn't evaporate. It tightened its focus. I didn't post the montage online. I sent it to the people who needed to see it, the superintendent, the board, the journalist. I let the system that had loved my mother also hold her to account. The district formed a committee. They asked questions about boundaries and best practices. They used phrases that polished culpability until you could check your hair in it. My mother resigned to spend more time with family. Donations were redirected to a student mental health fund she would not administer. There were kind comments on Facebook under a photo of her holding balloons. I took the job I'd been offered in another city. The nonprofit director called me and said that the board had been conflicted but that the work mattered and everyone deserved the dignity of being evaluated on what they did, not on what was whispered about them at dinner tables. The salary was smaller than my father thought dignified. The workspace was brighter than my mother would have chosen for concentration. I signed the contract and moved into an apartment with cheap blinds and light that pooled. The first week, I brought home a small plant and watered it too much. The second, I said yes to a drink and no to a second. The third, I called my therapist from my own number and said, I want to talk about my childhood. She set an appointment. I went. I did not spiral. I cried, which is not the same thing. I left with a homework assignment that did not involve gratitude but did involve a mirror. My mother emailed 3 times. The first was an apology written like a policy memo, clear headings, bullet points of failure. The second was a recipe for lemon chicken. The third said only, I had to be what you pushed against so you could push it all. I did not respond to any of them for a while. Then, one morning when the city smelled like hot metal and violets from the bodega and the street was loud with the kind of life my mother would have called brisk, I wrote back, I'm learning to be a person who doesn't need an enemy to become himself. She answered, that person will scare me. Love, Mom. Maybe you want a cleaner ending. Maybe you want me to say she was fired and shunned and learned humility and wrote a letter that made nuns weep. Or that she doubled down and sued the board and won and published a book about boundaries with a foreword by a senator. Maybe you want me to say I forgave her, or that I never will. I don't have those. I have a plant I'm trying not to drown. I have a job that feels like a room with windows. I have a mother who calls and sometimes I answer and sometimes I don't. We talk about weather. We talk about a neighbor's dog. We do not talk about the folder. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It would be simple to tie this with a bow and call it justice. It would be easy to argue that exposing her was necessary, or cruel, or both. It would be neat to say she saved me from my father's draft, that I saved myself from her shelter, that this is what growing up is, stepping out from under 2 kinds of shadow and blinking into your own light. Some days it feels like that. Some days it feels like I cut the strings only to discover I've been holding them, wrapped around my palm, all along. At the office, there's a boy who comes in for our youth program with a laugh that trips over itself and catches. He tells me he wants to build something no one can take apart. I tell him the trick isn't to make it unbreakable. The trick is to make it yours even when it breaks. He doesn't understand. I didn't either, at his age. Maybe he has a mother who loves him too much. Maybe he has a father who loves him loudly. Maybe he is alone. We print his design on cheap paper and he folds it carefully and puts it in his pocket and leaves, shoulders square, as if a wind is pushing from behind. I go home to the apartment where I have put the scissors in a drawer because I do not trust them on the counter. I cook something edible. I choose a movie and stop it halfway because I don't owe completion to anything that doesn't move me. I call no one. I sit on the floor because I can, because no one will come in and say you'll ruin your back. I breathe and the air does not taste like permission. It is only air. It smells like lemon because I have a candle, and the candle is mine. This is not immoral. It is a record. I performed an act of public honesty that was also an act of private vengeance. I did it because I was tired of being a character in a story someone else wrote and called love. I did it because every puppet eventually learns where the scissors are. I did it knowing that once cut, strings don't vanish, they fall, and you can trip on them if you're not careful. So now I'm asking, not for absolution, not for applause. I'm asking because we make sense of ourselves by holding our choices up to the light of other people's eyes. You've seen what I saw. You've heard what I heard. You know what I chose.